Hello, my name is Kotar Mahmoudi. I'm Vice President of Students for Justice in Palestine. We will now start the Q&A portion of tonight's event. I'll now hand it over to Professor Corey Robin.
Please identify yourself and,
Samir Chopra, philosophy. Stephen, I know these matters are sub judice, but I was wondering if you could say something about the specific legal issues that have arisen between you and the University of Illinois. I know that your legal team has already filed one lawsuit against the university. I can think of at least two more that you could file. I know you don't want to maybe give away your entire legal hand at this moment, but I think it would be really useful, I think also for the students to find out what the legal issues are, especially the First Amendment ones, and also what your options are going forward vis-a-vis the university if they hire you back, will you take it up, or they'll just stick their money where they'll shine.
Okay, thank you. I just sued 2 or 3 days ago, sometime this week, for to force the university to comply with FOIA requests, because it's a matter of public interest that citizens and taxpayers have access to what perhaps went into the university's decision, because the public concern factor of it, I think, is especially relevant because especially for the people of Illinois, because the university has it's experienced severe damage to its reputation. It's at the center of a nationwide controversy that unbelievably hasn't slowed down for over 3 months and shows no signs of slowing down anytime in the near future. So, it's required by law to release these documents, and so I'm hoping that the lawsuit will compel them to do it. I can't. I don't think it's not so much that I can't. I don't feel qualified to talk about some of the legal specificities of my case, but the folks at the Center for Constitutional Rights, one of the who are my co-counsel, are usually available and very eager to talk about the specific dynamics of the case. For me, I'm mostly. I mean, my first priority is to be reinstated to my job. I signed a contract. The university signed a contract. I've upheld my end of that contract. I'm simply waiting for the university to uphold its end of the contract. To me, it's no more complicated than that. But I want everybody who's been working in some way on this issue, not me, but us, those who are concerned about these issues of academic freedom and corporate governance and suppression of Palestinians and Palestine narratives. I want all of us to end up in a place where the university is unable to set precedent for this decision. No college or university president that I'm aware of in the United States has criticized or condemned the administration's actions, right? And that tells us a lot about where their rooting interests are, so to speak, right? They're sort of circling the wagons around the extraordinary amount of increased power and authority that this might provide them. And so for me, a sense of victory that doesn't just have to do with the courtroom or reinstatement, but helping to create a paradigm or a precedent in which this sort of action will become either verboten or extremely difficult to carry out in the future.
Okay, I see a line developing, so what I'm going to do is take 2 questions at a time, and so you can go to the next person, and then we'll get an answer.
I have a comment to make. My name is Ira Wexler. I'm a lifelong resident of Brooklyn and a lifelong struggler for against imperialism, racism, and for communism. And what I would like to say is that don't get caught up in the legalisms, my friend, because civility and legalisms go hand in hand. It's only the people's movement, the strength of the struggle, that it's going to save you. I can tell you from my own experience 2 years ago, after I was forced into retirement, when my bosses gave me a heart attack from struggling against their injustices at my hospital, that I was involved in the struggle to help keep SUNY Downstate open. It's a racist attack by Cuomo and his Wall Street backers against the health care for the working class. And I was arrested as a peripheral, just walking down the sidewalk, because they wanted to make an example out of people for fighting back. And what saved my ass was my comrades and myself getting 200 hospital workers to sign petitions demanding that they drop the charges against me. It wasn't any lawyer who got me off. So, word to the wise. And I'll tell you what, we need to have outrage, because I was, my grandmother's, maternal grandmother's family was from Hungary. And they were, 1 million Hungarian Jews went to Auschwitz because of the Zionist leadership of the State of Israel. And, Rupert Kastner, this is all documented, Rupert Kastner, the first interior minister under Ben Gurion, made a deal with Ben Gurion and the leadership of the Jewish Council's committee approval to negotiate with Eichmann for the release of,
So your
15,000 Jews.
Okay.
Only Zionists. Eichmann offered 1 million for a few $1 million more. He refused.
My name is Steve Bloom, and I think it's useful when we consider the difficulty we have explaining the parallel of settler colonialism in Palestine and in the United States to remember that that's a difficulty in this country. And in the rest of the world, people don't have any trouble understanding that. I had occasion to visit Northern Ireland some years ago, and I was struck by the fact that every place that I saw the Irish Republican flag hanging, I saw a Palestinian flag hanging side by side. It's not an accident that the South Africans who struggled against apartheid instantly recognized the nature of Israeli apartheid, don't have any trouble with that. And most of the world has a history of being the victims of colonialism. So the U.S., the official reality in the United States is fighting a rearguard action on that question. And I think it gives us some perspective just to keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Do you guys want to respond at all, or do we want to keep going with the Q&A? Or
I find nothing to disagree with or to add to. It's a good comment.
We'll take 2 more questions now.
First off, good evening. My name is Jamal Henderson. I'm a proud political science major here at Brooklyn College. And my question is, do you feel that the current situation, this for both academically, in regards to the state between Israel and Palestine, has the same effect, if any, between the internal state within the United States between African Americans and whites during the time of the struggle to get particular academic studies on universities across the country? Do you feel it's still taking effect, or do you feel like there's any difference? So that's my question.
And then we're going to take 1 more, and then.
Okay.
And I appreciated the conciseness of that.
Hi, Mr. Salaita. My name is Michelle. So I'm just going to quote something you said. I'm not contesting your right to speak here today. I think you have every right to speak here. But I'm just going to quote something you said on one of your tweets. I think of all the pain Israelis have caused, their smugness, their greed, their violence, and yet I smile because it's only temporary. You didn't mention settlements, settlers here. You just mentioned Israelis as a whole. And so this statement, you were talking about me, my family, my friends, my people, the people of Israel, people who I love. You never met me, but in your eyes, I'm greedy, I'm smug, I'm violent, I'm all these terrible things, and you don't even know who I am. You even managed to connect it to greed, which is I'm not saying you're anti-Semitic, but which is the classic anti-Semitic stereotype, greed and Jews. And you also said that we're only a temporary people in the state of Israel, and I found that offensive. But my question really here today is for Professor Robbins, because I do think you have the right to be here. I think you are allowed to speak. I think it's academic freedom. My question is, so Mr. Robbins, we've spoken before, Michelle Caravello. Do you think it's appropriate for you, a head of a department, representing a whole department on campus, to champion a speaker who speaks such hateful and insightful things about me, about my nation, about people who I love and who I see every day? Would you support a speaker who said these sorts of things about Palestinians, blacks, gays, and any other groups in the name of speech and the name of academic freedom? Would you support bringing someone like that to our campus?
Do you guys want to speak first in response to both questions, or
I'm afraid this gentleman's question is going to get lost in our reactions to the second question. So maybe we can. Could you give me a recap of your question? I'm sorry. I apologize. This always happens to me.
Yes, the question was, do you feel that the current situation in regards to the state academically between universities, between Israel and Palestine, has the same effect, if any, between the eternal state between African Americans and whites during the time of the struggle and present to get particular academic studies on universities across the country?
Okay. So you want me to sort of attempt an answer first on that one? Okay. And well, it's a really good question. It's a difficult question because it covers a lot of ground, and I don't feel completely qualified to stand on some of that ground, but I'll try my best. Very aware that I have certain knowledge and disciplinary limitations, but if you're sort of talking about a type of a type of majoritarian white violence, directed historically and contemporaneously against a minority ethnic group, African Americans, right? Then I think that there are ways in which it has and does resemble the Zionist occupation of Palestine and the interaction of Palestinians and Jews. But I think there are considerable differences also. The first considerable difference strikes me as the history of chattel slavery, right, and the history of Reconstruction and sort of the presence of folks of African descent on the North American continent as a land that's distinctly not of their origin in terms of their actual histories and their imagination. All of those things, I think, render the case of black folks in the United States, if not unique, then certainly unusual and not of a same class as the type of inequalities that we see in Palestine. Some of the similarities, though, I think arise around, first of all, Israel's role in training and in some cases arming the police forces that in turn end up practicing various forms of brutality, right, against black people in the United States. I think also the very the anxiety that the black body bodies of black ideas continue to have in the American imagination strike me as belonging to the same broad political class as the the anxieties that the mere presence of Palestinians can sort of evoke, right, in the consciousness of many Israelis. But I think outside of specific instances, like what's been happening and what continues to happen in Ferguson versus what happens in the West Bank and Gaza, it's very difficult, I think, to put forward a scholarly comparison of the two situations in a way that would be fully convincing, if that makes any sense.
If I can add just very quickly, I think there's a similar relationship in which certain people are deemed to be out of place.
Yeah.
And by virtue of their being in the wrong place, they are out of order. And I think of Trayvon Martin, but even before that, I think of the black children who were bused into the Little Rock schools. Small number of African American children who the police and the governor of Arkansas deemed to be a threat to the white children because they were in the wrong place. And I think Palestinian people, but Arabs more generally, are often seen as being in the wrong place, and by virtue of that being out of order, that their very presence is a threat to certain ideas, but also to the peace. And just to bring us back to civility, I think there's something always already uncivil that is people who are out of place, and by virtue of where they are out of order. And I think it's a productive connection that you could do good work on as a student here at Brooklyn College.
Yeah.
So I'm going to respond to your question, but I want to make it clear to everybody two things. One is I'm speaking not as the chair of the political science department, I'm speaking as myself, and I think it's very important to make that claim. And then secondly, this is the only time I'm going to speak to this issue because this panel is not about me, and it is not about what I think about Stephen Salaita and what he said. So I will say it once, but then that's it. I'm not going to speak about this again. I feel, as a matter of both moral, political, and legal principle, and it's something that I've devoted a significant amount of my intellectual academic work to, that nobody should be penalized at their place of work for their political views and their political statements. And I don't care what those political statements are. If Stephen Salaita had said these things about Palestinians, it would not change my position on that question. And I think this is just absolutely a fundamental principle that people should not be penalized at work for what they say politically, number one. But number two, I reject the premise of the statement. I think Stephen has made it very clear. I mean, just think of an analogy that if a Vietnamese person during the Vietnamese War, the Vietnam War, said something about Americans and said the exact same thing, it would seem like the obvious thing to say. It would not seem to me to be a problematic thing. And I think I understand there's a personal connection for you, but I think the flip side of it is we're talking about a state and what the state does and what its citizens do. And that's the reality. And so I think you want to see this as a form of hate speech. I don't see it. But frankly, again, even if I disagreed with it, the principle would still be absolutely the same for me. So.
Permission granted. Can I ask one question?
Okay, so we have two more questions.
Hi, my name is Haim. I'm a pre-medical student here at Brooklyn College. Thank you for coming to speak. My question is, in the past you said that anybody who's supportive of Israel is a horrible human being. In what way can these comments be taken out of context in what you mean? For example, thousands of Jews left France this summer and Europe in fear of anti-Semitism. Just this week, there was a firebombing at a sushi restaurant in Paris. So my question to you is, in what way does anti-Zionist comments get translated as anti-Semitic comments, and in what way do you think you're responsible for that sort of thing happening?
Okay.
Just let me take the second question as well.
Oh, I forgot. Okay.
just 'cause
Yeah.
I wanna
Yeah.
make sure
Sorry.
we're-
Yeah.
Stanley Heller, the Struggle Video News. First question is about civility. For what King Leopold of Belgium did to the people in the Congo, Mark Twain proposed that Leopold be stuffed and put on a pyramid of skulls. And my question is, do you think someone as uncivil as Mark Twain could ever be hired at the University of Illinois, Champaign, Urbana? Second point is, look at the tweets, become a follower. I've read hundreds of tweets, and they are not hateful. Compared to the monstrous things that went on this summer, they were restrained. Third point, I want to know the good guys and the bad guys. Who stood up for principle? What organizations? Because I'm a member of the American Federation of Teachers for 40 years, and I don't think our union did. I contacted the National, Weingarten said nothing, UFT, Mulgrew said nothing, the college division said nothing. I believe in Champaign-Urbana they did, that local of the non-tenured people took a position. Rutgers, but those two tiny islands in all of the AFT is pretty shameful. This is an organization with lots of college professors, and it should be standing up for academic freedom.
All right. Thanks, Stanley. I'll get to that comment after I address Haim's. You tell me if I'm mischaracterizing your words as I read back what I remember you saying. You said that how can I justify saying that supporters of Israel are horrible people?
In the context of how these things are misconstrued.
Okay, but I didn't say that anybody who is a supporter of Israel is a horrible person. To my knowledge, I've never made such a statement or suggested it. I did say that if you support what Israel is doing, I think this is the exact tweet. I'm not sure. If you support what Israel is doing in Gaza right now, you're an awful human being.
No, it's actually even if you're defending. It's even a higher bar, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're defending Israel right now, you're an awful human being.
Okay.
So I had the quote written.
Thank you. Okay.
My apologies for misquoting.
No, it's okay. But there's no need for apology. But I mean, this is there are two ways that I think I can that I would like to respond to your query, and one is that this is a platform that relies first and foremost on rhetorical performance, and the entire genre is given to hyperbole in argument. Although I do believe that in the case of the tweet that Corey read back, it's not. I wouldn't. I mean, you can read it any way you want to, but reading it as an implication of people's moral decency or lack thereof is certainly one way to read it. But you could also read it in a more imaginative way, as a way of saying that the evidence for Israel doing horrible things has become incontrovertible, right? That there's no excuse anymore to defend Israel's actions, given the information to which we're all privy in the moment. But as to the second point, about the anti-Semitic incidents you cite. Quite frankly, I wouldn't implicate myself in a single damn one of them. I would deeply stand against any form of racial violence or any sort of anti-Semitic violence, and I don't know that there's any convincing causality between the work of anti-Zionism and the practice of anti-Semitism. In fact, I would there are always exceptions, but it seems to me that on the whole, it's the Palestine solidarity community and Palestinians themselves that constantly go out of their way to make sure that we're making distinctions, right? And that any proper, in my mind, any proper ethic or value that stands against Zionism must also necessarily stand against anti-Semitism or any other form of racism. Otherwise, to me, it's not the type of anti-Zionism that I would be associated with. So while I can imagine that there is somebody with an anti-Zionist point of view, right, who might also support anti-Semitic violence, that is somebody who I likewise would condemn, and somebody that I would never, ever consider a political comrade, somebody that I wouldn't want to be in political community with, because to me, anti-Zionism or being against anti-Zionism in philosophy or on principle is more than just a matter of opposing what the Israeli government does. It's a matter also of being in conversation with an entire range of decolonial and anti-racism, anti-sexism politics. It's a statement of a particular sort of political ethic, right, and a political identity more than anything. But I would all I can tell you is that any time that I've had the misfortune to encounter or be in contact with somebody whose articulations of anti-Zionism seem to transition explicitly or implicitly into any sort of endorsement of anti-Semitism, then I boot that person from my life. It's not the type of person that I want to be around.
Two more questions.
My name is Susie Neckley. I have introduced myself to you before, but I'll tell everyone else. I'm also an Arab American English professor, and so your story has been deeply moving to me and a little bit terrifying. I also, try to put political theory and post-colonial critique into my study of English literature. I just want to say, as someone who's in a classroom a lot of the time, I'm really a lot more worried about folks who weren't outraged by the carnage in Gaza, who didn't have the heart or the humanism to get a little bit angry being in classrooms. So the tone of your tweets never bothered me at that particular moment in time, but I did actually have a little intellectual quibble, and that is with your characterizations of Zionism, which to me seem a bit narrow. I'm deeply interested in concepts of the nation, and there are lots of them out there, and I think that they're older than we really realize. And so I was just hoping that maybe you could talk a little bit about your concepts of the nation and nationalism. Do you see Zionism as a form of nationalism? Do you see Palestinian nationalism as something worthwhile? Can you tell us what you think Zionism is, what you think the nation is, and how they work together? I mean, I don't know. I see a lot of different options out there, and perhaps some interdependence. And my time's up. So, and shukran again.
Have fun. Thank you.
I just want to add 2 points of information to Catherine's last comments about civility, and that has to do with the way in which the notion has entered public discourse, and especially in the educational field. And I'm referring here to the corporate media, specifically the New York Times, which had 2 interesting articles yesterday or the day before and today. 2 days ago, there was a little story, very nice story, about a debate team in a high school. You saw it. And it was just a story, and a picture of a nice little boy of color, probably African-American boy, reading from his debate thing, but the headline was "Civilized Debate." That was the one thing. And then today, interestingly, in the business section, because you mentioned the corporatization of the university and the move toward careerism in teaching, today there was a story about students applying to universities and cleaning up their email addresses and cleaning up their social media because in their applications these were being scrutinized. So I just want to say that when you said this is reminiscent of the 50s, which I hate to admit I remember, you know, this is very reminiscent, and it's taking the form of self-censorship, which is almost the worst kind that there is. So just a comment.
Okay, so Zionism, ethno-nationalism, the nation, nationalism. I care far too deeply about you folks than to go down the path of reflecting on these things, because presumably everybody's dealt with enough hardship in their lives without having to listen to me ruminate. These are very complex questions. So I'm going to try to give you what I hope is a satisfying answer, satisfying in the sense that it addresses the core of your question, without turning into Benedict Anderson.
That wouldn't be so bad.
I guess no, actually, yeah, that maybe okay. So, okay, everybody, bring out your pillows. Okay. I will fess up to sometimes deploying, especially on Twitter, the term Zionist in crude and rudimentary ways. I think a lot of us end up doing that, and I do think it's important that we step back and assess things and try to put forward at least a terminological precision that others can engage and choose to challenge if they want to say, well, you're not thinking about it complexly enough, or maybe think about it in this way and not that way. In my defense, like in Israel's Dead Soul, I spend many pages articulating what I see to be the different iterations of Zionism. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm not going to blame it on Twitter. I'm going to blame it on myself. Everybody blames, well, it's Twitter. It's like, look, 140 characters is absolutely no excuse for not having any reading comprehension. Do you know what I mean? It's just, it's less of an excuse in lots of ways. But anyhow, but I see Zionism as in some iterations as a form of nationalism, but I see it primarily as a mode of ethno-nationalism. Right, and it's the ethno-nationalism of Zionism that I reject from a moral and philosophical point of view. I think there's an element or an ideology of nation building in some of the earlier versions of Zionism, but it quickly gave way to and ended up losing out to a vision of Israel that was fundamentally statist, right, or focused on a state, right, and not on a national community, right, but on a nation state in the European incarnation of the term. There are versions of Palestinian ethno-nationalism that I likewise reject, and I try to make it a point to reject all versions of ethno-nationalism. And by ethno-nationalism, by the way, I mean a form of nationalism that invokes the primacy of a particular group of people, which is usually defined in arbitrary and problematic ways, right? Like even the question of who is a Jew is a question that's been taken up by the state of Israel, and I don't want the state defining my religious identity. You know what I mean? I don't, and so the problems of ethno-nationalism are that they never it never as an ideology or as a practice encompasses the totality of the population with which it's either in contact or overseas, right? And in that sense, it's always fundamentally exclusive. And in its exclusions, it ends up relying on disparate legal systems, disparate access to rights, and so forth and so on. And I'll stop there. Yes, of course.
I just wanted to say one thing about the civility story in the paper the other day. Was these kids from the city who were putting on little suit jackets and ties and going up to Hackley, which is a very elite private school in Westchester, and doing these debate team things. And you know, there's a place for the debate club everywhere. I think it's an interesting, mannered way of talking about a topic and teaching students how to have a particular form of debate. But if everything we did in the university was in that form, I mean, imagine it. Agamben's bare life, pro and against. Kant's categorical imperative, for and against. You know, Conrad's heart of darkness, for and against.
Can we be both?
Yeah,
For
right.
or,
Well, that's the
okay,
thing,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean,
that's,
it's a send-up, right? I could see us doing it as a parody. So certain questions lend themselves to debate in that very stylized format. And the skills that come out of that format are useful in certain parts of life. But so much of what we do at a university is neither of those.
I'm going to take 3 questions, and then they'll answer, and then the last 3, and I hope we'll get there. So I'm going to take each of the 3 of you first. But everybody try to.
Okay.
Quick.
I'm Roz Pacheski. I'm a retired political science professor from Hunter College in the Graduate Center, and I have a brief comment and a question. Well, my comment goes back to Catherine's concept of the wedge and the ways in which the debate about Israel and Palestine becomes a wedge, and I would say not just for clamping down on academic freedom in universities, but also for tightening the security state. And I want to give an example. When we were in Puerto Rico this past week and when we succeeded in getting the statement supporting BDS and the academic boycott through the National Women's Studies Association, we did this. We were in a final business meeting, and we had collected around 790 petition signatures. And we wanted to hand them over to the officers of the organization. And one of the officers of the organization, they passed it. It went through. But she raised a point. She said, I'm worried about the legal liability of our organization if you give us these petitions, if a circumstance arises and we may be called on to hand them over. And we all were chilled, and we thought, yes, this is a security state that we're living in now, especially around Palestine. My question, you haven't talked very much about BDS actually, and I work with Community for Palestine, and I work with Jewish Voice for Peace. In our New York City Jewish Voice for Peace chapter, we're moving much more now in the direction of saying we, as the American taxpayers, our responsibility is to stop U.S. funding of Israeli militarism. That's the direction we all need to be going in. It's a moral responsibility, it's a political responsibility. How do you do it?
The person behind you. We're going to do 3 questions.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah. I'm also a member of Students for Justice in Palestine. I want to thank everyone for speaking today. First, there's a lot I want to say, but thank you for speaking about the question of civility, because I think you're right. It absolutely has nothing to do with academic inquiry and discourse. And actually, if ever I am uncivil, it's because I'm passionate about what I'm learning, and what I'm learning is evoking emotion in me. So I want to just put that out there. And I also want to make a statement about a letter which I sent to you, Stephen, on Facebook, that Assemblyman Simbrowitz had written to President Gould, and also Assemblyman Dov Hivkin has made similar statements. Really, just how dare they make the association between the act that happened in the synagogue, the murders of those Jewish people during morning prayer, which is atrocious in and of itself, but how dare they associate tonight's event with that? And I think that's something that everyone in the campus community has to come out and condemn, that is a straw man argument, that is a cowardly association to make, and really doesn't belong. And I've been on campus before when another professor from Brooklyn College, Christopher Peterson Overton, was dismissed for having critical pieces in his syllabus, like authors like Ilan Pappé speaking about criticizing the state of Israel, and he was fired. So much I want to say. I think that something else that's anti-Semitic, that not the tweets that he put out there, but what's anti-Semitic is to assume that the Jewish identity is monolithic, that all Jews think the same, and that they're all Zionists, and I think that's absolutely wrong, and we need to break from that really bullshit, excuse me, criticism. And lastly, I have so many other things to say, but if you see anyone with a badge, please come up and speak to us so you can learn more of events that we have in the future. Thank you.
Oh dear, I'm just going to repeat what some other people have said very eloquently, but I think that we're living in an age when society is undergoing a transformation from quantity into quality in a very fascist direction. One of those aspects is what's happening to academic freedom. I'm sitting next to a young man who just spent 7 months in jail for protesting. We live in an era of mass incarceration as well as mass incineration by our government and our allies, thinking of Gaza in particular. Militarization of the police, very much in league with being trained in Israel. And to me, I just want to add that I think all these very fascist tendencies are coming, they're really a symptom of capitalism and desperation. When you have a country that's failing economically, that's losing out in worldwide competition, and we're facing endless war, not only just against ISIS and for oil in the Middle East, but probably against China. And so I want to reiterate what I think the very first speaker said, was that it's a time when we have to think about building a mass movement. It has to be not just an error in democracy movement, but an anti-capitalist movement. And so the only question I'd like to ask Stephen is, could you tell us about all the people and groups who have come together to support you? Because I think that is a mass movement that's significant.
Okay, thank you. And this actually allows me, I think, to circle back to Stanley's question, which never quite got answered. But the interesting thing about some of the support is it's brought together people who haven't always or even often been in harmony with one another politically. So there's kind of a broad, very broad coalition that agrees I should be reinstated, if not on much else, right? That kind of consists of liberals, radicals, and libertarians, right? And it's an interesting political cocktail. I think some classic conservatives too. I think a lot of labor unions have sort of thrown their hat into the ring. But some of the groups that the AAUP, that's the American Association of University Professors, has been very supportive. The Modern Language Association, which is I don't know, it's kind of the queen mother of all scholarly associations. It's they're the ones that I was going to make a joke about handbooks, but I realized that students don't carry around reference manuals, for citation manuals anymore, do they? Okay, anyway, I need to update my sense of humor. The American Historical Association, actually, Corey can, Corey, the AHA, right? Yeah. I mean, Corey spearheaded an effort that resulted in, at this point, I think over 6,000 faculty members boycotting the university. It's kind of been a remarkable outpouring, and it's actually helped me mend some political fences, so to speak. There's some folks that I'd argued with in the past who were like, Steve, this is BS. You got railroaded. You have my support, and I said, this bickering is done. And sometimes it takes an issue so obvious, right? Sometimes so obvious and so egregious that it becomes sometimes easier to put aside other differences and focus on what is pretty easy to recognize as something of an injustice. But yeah, the support's come from labor. It's come from scholarly groups, scholarly associations, individual academic departments from across the country, and even a good amount of support from student groups, both graduate and undergraduate. But somebody ought to list out the interesting coalitions that have developed around this particular interest in academic freedom.
CCR has on their website.
Oh, okay. The CCR has it on their website. Thank you.
Can I say one thing about BDS? Very briefly, it's important to remember that BDS is a tactic. It's not its own politic. There are plenty of people who share a critique with some of us about of the state of Israel who will not endorse BDS. And I think we ought to remain mindful to the fact that boycott, sanctions, and divestment can be useful in some ways, and when it stops being useful, we'll stop doing it. And we ought to, and when appropriate, allow exemptions to a call for BDS, which is what the South Africans did, the ANC did as well, when they made a call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. But I think there are some avenues, and this is, I know, a controversial position, but there's some avenues of our movements that are rigid about BDS and insist on it and use it as a litmus test. And I think that's to mistake a tactic for a politics that is much larger than that. So it's important, and when it works, great, and when it stops working, let's try something else.
Hi, my name is Thomas DeAngelis. I'm a Brooklyn College student, also a member of Students for Justice in Palestine. I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone who spoke tonight. Thank you for the students who organize it, and also the Brooklyn College staff, which is MISU, who take their time out to make this happen and allow it to happen. So I just want to say, as a student here, I'm so proud to be part of two of the departments co-sponsoring the event, Sociology and Puerto Rican and Latino Studies. However, I think it's disheartening that there are faculty and departments who are so opposed to co-sponsoring this event and having it on campus. The extent to which faculty members and departments here who do not want to support events such as this is striking, and says a lot about their commitment to the investment in maintaining colonial powers across the globe. It is also a concern that local politicians are opposed to events happening on our campus. I think it's important for students here to understand that this campus belongs to us more than it does to any city council member. This school will not be open otherwise, so that's the reality of it. So we as students here really have so much more power than we think, and I think I just wanted to make that clear. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, my name is Moshe. I am on the executive board of the Israel Club, actually, so I'm from the other side. I think once we're on the train of reading statements from our phones, I'm going to do the same thing. Depends on who's here, trying to gather my thoughts. So we were talking before about nationalism and Judaism and Zionism as being, these different ideas. So not all Jews are the same, and many Jews are not religious, many are, and not all the religious Jews do support the state of Israel. But even those Jews who do not support the modern state of Israel do pray 3 times a day for God to restore Israel as a Jewish country. And that is beneficial to society in terms of solving the anti-Semitic problem, and that is beneficial because under a idealistic Jewish society, it would be open and democratic to all people. Now, I just want to point out also that in academic conversation, you don't really get to define how people perceive what you say. So what I'm saying now, people are going to take it and understand it however they want. When you talk about Zionism, you're talking about Jews because many Jews inherently identify with their prayers and their Zionism. And the name Israel is not an accident. It comes from Jewish literature and Jewish history. And if you're going to say that Zionism is not related to Judaism, then you're kind of missing the other side's perception of the conflict. And then how do you expect to come to a resolution when all you're doing is arguing with somebody? And this goes back to the civility conversation. Civility is not necessarily inherently a moral high ground or a moral absolute, but it's just a common sense way to get people to listen to you. If you're gonna tweet things like, I wish all the settlers would go missing, people are just gonna look at you and say, who the hell are you? Because it's not a nice way to talk, and you don't like when people talk to you like that, so why would you talk about somebody else like that? It's not common sense. It's a dumb way to solve your problem. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
This is the last question, yeah.
All right. Hi, how are you? I'm a political science major. You don't look like a crazy guy to me. I'll be honest with you. At the end of the day, the argument happens, but I actually have a more distinct question to have is, Professor Robin just denied this young woman's existence as a person, as an Israeli citizen, as a person who, Druze, Muslim, Jewish, whatever. You're denying their existence. So if you really want to have this debate, you're going to have the same room and the same people every time you go around. And look, I don't believe in the settlements. I think there should be a two-state solution. And Professor Robin's going to disagree with me on that. Some other people might disagree with me here on that. But I think we really need to look towards peace. And I think my generation needs to build towards peace. So I know, and the other question I had is, how do we get to that? And I know that Bruce Rottner and Pat Quinn both endorsed the vote against you. How did you feel about that? That was good.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'll start with the last question. Unfortunately, our time is winding down, so I don't want to end up yammering into infinity. First of all, I think that it takes a sort of courage to come speak in opposition to an invited guest when the majority of the crowd is obviously on the guest's side. So I appreciate you coming, and I appreciate you sharing your viewpoints and asking your questions. There are viewpoints that I tend not to agree with, but I think they give us a basis at least for having what might be a constructive conversation. I have, dialogue. I'm not such a fan of the connotations of that term, but an actual political conversation. To go back to something Moshe said, Judaism predates Zionism by thousands of years, and so in the end, I understand. I get it. I understand that Zionism can be, for some people, a profound element of their sense of being Jewish. Right? I understand that. I understand that Zionism can be seen as a profound cultural obligation. But it doesn't seem to me fair or accurate, though, to say that because it exists that way to some members of an ethnic or religious community, it can be invoked to define the entire ethnic or religious community. Because I know enough people who see opposition to Zionism as an essential part of their being Jewish, right? And so in the end, it's a political ideology that has different uses for different people, and for some people it doesn't have any uses at all. I imagine that there are at least some Jews around the world who don't give a damn one way or the other, right? I don't know if that's the case, but I'm making a guess here, right? I certainly know that there are some Palestinians around the world who don't seem to give a damn one way or the other, right? And so but the idea of an open and democratic society that Moshe invoked is really interesting to me, and I actually think is a really productive point of engagement. See, the question that I would ask and that I want to think about in relation to that comment, right? And it is a comment I've really not heard before, and it's a comment that I find fascinating. I don't know that. What does it mean to have an open democratic society that still exists in the framework of a specifically Judaic political project? Is that even possible? Right? And if it's going to be really open and democratic, what elements of Palestinian culture and history must it necessarily entail, right? So these are sort of questions that come up that I think we need to think about. I know that the second speaker had asked me a question at the end, and I forgot it. We should probably try to close.
So Professor Robin, I think this is why he didn't want me to ask a question. He denied that woman.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
But
clearly denied that woman's existence as a person, as Israeli. And, we can talk about Israel and Palestine, and, international law says that there should be two states. And I get it that you guys are trying to posture and say that you're great social justice warriors and move to the left of that. How do you transcend that movement where he doesn't go off the rails and puts people like me in the middle who don't want settlements, who want a two-state solution, who want a Palestinian and an Israeli state, who have a Canadian peace? For people just sitting against you just because of comments made.
Okay. All right. You know what? Excuse me. You've had a second chance now to ask your question. So.
Oh, sorry. My bad.
It is your bad, actually.
Our car's downstairs.
So, okay. You can either respond quickly if you want to, but it's.
Okay. I appreciate the comment, and the question is worth exploring, but I have to say, though, that I'm, as a general political rule, unimpressed and unmoved by statements of political policy that include the word me. So that's kind of all I have to say.
So the last word is gonna go to SJP, but before we do that, this is now the third, fourth, fifth event that SJP has organized, and I think has enriched our campus, but also enriched the community. And I think it's not just a moral issue. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into this kind of stuff, and I just think, and a lot of red tape, as I've discovered, and I think they deserve a round of applause for bringing this to the campus.
So I'd like to just thank everyone, our speakers, everyone who's attended. And, if you'd like to keep up with updates from SJP, our website is brooklynsjp.com. We also have a Facebook page, so if you'd like to become more involved, if you'd like to just keep up with our events, you can like us on Facebook or visit our website. And other than that, I'd like to thank you all and have a good evening. I'm not sure if there's still some refreshments or not. It looks like it's empty. But yeah, so thank you all for attending. Thank you, speakers.